Big Beautiful Bill, more like Big Blue Wave playlisters, because America went to the polls yesterday and they said, surf's up, Democrats.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
God.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anthony Barquette.
And I am decked in blue today. Anthony in a little bit darker shade of navy. Wow, did we have an election yesterday? But we're going to get to that in a sec. We're going to be talking about Congressman Kevin Kiley, the politician on our playlist this episode. We're going to break down how to talk about SNAP benefits. And later we're going to talk about the win of the week, which I think there's a pretty good win to call out here. But first, Anthony, it was election night in America, and boy, was it a doozy. We should also say Anna's not here. She's on a plane to Mexico right now. We can't disclose why she's going to Mexico, but she's going to Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, you would have heard if Anna was on by now, right?
Yeah, you would. But obviously last night we had a handful of elections across the country, a few major ones being the governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, won. The governor of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, won. I should say they were candidates. They're now governor-elect. Both some really, really impressive women with significant national security backgrounds. Abigail Spanberger, former representative of Virginia, who we used to cover on this show. Of course, the young upstart candidate out of New York, Zohran Mamdani, won against Creepy Cuomo and Sideways Sliwa, and, just a whole host of other down ballot races. Of course, we're going to talk about Prop 50, which passed here in California. But I want to get your takeaway from the night, Anthony. What stood out to you? We'll talk about sort of the larger implications, but first impressions.
Well, for starters, I just want to say I'm wearing all black. It's not because of the mood, but it's
Gotcha.
a darker shade of blue, okay, of navy blue.
Okay, got it.
Honestly, I would say it's hard to imagine the night going better for Democrats. Yeah. I mean, they won every single race by some of the biggest margins I've seen. I thought they would be much closer. And I think this kind of just provides a lot of clarity on, how things might look. I think Trump was also waiting to see what happened on this election before he made moves on the shutdown. So I'm interested to see how these results are going to impact, SNAP benefits, which we're going to talk about, the government shutdown. And I think generally, all of this is weighed pretty heavily on people. I know for myself, but I think people were looking at, hey, like ICE raids are quite wild. They're grabbing people on their way to schools, at workplaces. The DHS is blatantly lying that they haven't arrested any U.S. citizens when people are coming out being like, I was detained for 2.5 months, and I'm a U.S. citizen.
Insane. Yeah.
Where you're like, I like, we're not stupid. You're seeing federal troops march on cities. People are getting fired, furloughed. President's saying he's not leaving office. I think all of the, costs are at an all-time high for living, food prices, going out to restaurants, traveling. Okay, you want to say this is all Biden? You're 10 months into your job, buddy. Like, what's going on?
This is, I think, the dumb, easy, yet catastrophic political mistake that Trump and the Trump administration are doing, which is, if you recall, after the midterm, leading up to the midterms and after the midterms during the Biden presidency, all he kept saying was, guys, the economy's doing great. Look at all these numbers. Look at all these figures. We're the strongest rebound from COVID, blah, blah, blah. And yet Americans didn't feel that. They didn't feel like the economy was doing great. They didn't feel like their paycheck was going farther. They didn't feel like the cost of goods and living was going down. They felt the opposite. And the Biden administration, I think, mistakenly tried to jawbone voters into feeling like, oh, the economy is great. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing Donald Trump do the exact same thing, talking about how, like, this is the greatest first 10 months of a presidency in the history of the world, like all this shit. And the reality is last night you said it. It was not just about how the Democrats ran the tables. The story is in the margins, and the message is in the margins. And the message was, hey, Trump, we don't fucking like what you're doing. And we don't agree that the country is doing amazing. And we don't agree that, as you know, you're posting photos of a Gatsby party at your private club opening and your newly renovated marble bathroom in the White House. We don't feel like things are good for us.
So the country is going well for the people in the 0.001%. And those are the people in the inner circle right now. Right. And I think that's sort of what I think the Trump administration is missing, is everyone in their circle is making money, having a great time, life's good, you know, but the rest of the country is not. You know, despite Mamdani now being elected mayor, I've been talking to a lot of friends in New York, and they felt like New York's been going down. They're like, it's unaffordable to live in. You know, it's just not as fun as it used to be. Granted, we're at a different time, but, you know, I could see if I was living in New York, and these are friends who are making money saying it's unaffordable. You know, you're sitting there going, why am I going to elect Cuomo, who, you know, feels like I'm not going to get back to where I was, maybe. And I'd rather take this chance on a younger person who seems way more personable. Granted, you know, some of his ideas are quite no experience, and his ideas are quite radical. But it's been interesting because a lot of friends who are really against him have pointed to places like the UK and France, where there's been Muslim leadership, which has now caused a lot of issues in those countries. So I think Mamdani is also going to be bad for Democrats, which I also think like AOC is, because it's just going to allow the Republicans to focus on like one person for the rest of the country.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I think one of my other takeaways from last night is, you know, we'll call it the tale of two Democratic parties, right? And I think that you look at Mamdani and his supporters and his policies and his platforms, and that is very much like as far left, progressive, socialist kind of a thing as it gets. And then you look at Abigail Spanberger, who won by like 15 points, and Mikey Sherrill, who won by like 13 points. These are massive, massive victories. And I think what's surprising is how the Democrats overperformed last night. I mean, we're so used to like, you know, Democrats and bedwetting, and we're like, oh, I don't know if we're going to do it. We're like, we doubt. And like, they just hit one grand slam after another.
I mean, what about the Virginia House of Delegates? Democrats went from 51 to 64 seats.
Right.
51 to 64 seats.
I mean, resounding.
I mean, victory. Maybe the Republicans think firing half of Virginia was a smart idea.
Right. I don't think so.
Probably not the best idea.
Here's the thing, though. So I think that every Republican politician, Republican pundits and news media are going to absolutely try and hang the Democratic Party around Mamdani and say, he's the guy, he's the face of the party. But I don't know. I don't think that is really going to stick ultimately with voters, because of the numbers and because of the fact that you now have other very successful faces out there. You have huge success with Abigail Spanberger, former CIA officer. You've got huge success with Mikey Sherrill, former military. I think she was in the Army or Air Force. And, you know, it's like, okay. And then you look at the Prop 50 victory with California that I think is going to pass by like well over 60% when all the vote is in. And that is a huge, huge win for Newsom. and his, he's obviously running for president. So all of a sudden it's like, yeah, like, Mom Donnie is the easy boogeyman. And again, not to say anything about, what I think his policies or how, if they're going to be good or bad, but just the politics of it. I think that there are so many other successful faces on the night that it's not like everyone lost and Mom Donnie was the only one that won. If that was the case, that would be a very different story. But I think that it is going to be very difficult for Republicans to just paint the Democratic Party as the Mamdani party like it would love to do.
Yeah. Well, I also think, last night felt like there was a bit for people, there was some hope, especially from the Democratic side. Especially with some of these young people coming in. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, on that point, not to interrupt you, but, I was listening to some very smart pundits talk about how for the first time since, I think, let's say when Joe Biden dropped out of the race, right? So
Joe Biden,
I don't know, 12, 15 months ago, for the first time, the story has not been about how the Democrats are screwing up. The story has been about, oh, we're back to now Trump isn't working. And I think last night was the first shift of that narrative, right? So much has been like the Democratic Party is in shambles, like they have a brand crisis. Well, not last night. They don't.
Well, and to me, the big win for Democrats was someone like Abigail Spanberger. She's going to be the first woman governor of the state's history, which is so cool. But since we've started Political Playlist, she was on our platform. And I think she would be an amazing president. And we've been saying that since she's been on our platform. So I think we're going to see just a new side of Abigail Spanberger. She's now she's just keeps climbing in notoriety. And everyone's realizing she is awesome. This win for her, 15-point win for governor of Virginia. What? I have 4 years. I think we're going to see her running for president.
Yeah, I think, we really might. And certainly if she's not running for president, she'll be a top VP candidate, I think.
And just talk about, I know we'll chat more about this later, but really it showed a lot the future is female. I mean, from Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Governor of New Jersey, we had first Black woman elected to statewide office in Georgia. We had a whole host of first female mayors in many cities as well.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, just we love seeing the first happen.
Right.
Because that's normally a lot of the people on our platform. So, making history is pretty cool.
Well, since Anna's not here to scold us or cheer at what you just said, let's just go out of order a little bit. That was actually going to be my win of the week, which was the incredible firsts that we saw last night. As you said, we love first. And, particularly with, electing so many women to these roles. And Rachel Jamfaza, who is with CNN, who we've had on the show before, I saw her post something where it was like, women were the story last night. And it was something like 81% of women voters in New York City went for Mom Donnie. 80% of women voters in Virginia went for Spanberger, and 79% of women voters in New Jersey went for Cheryl. And it was like, wow, that is unbelievable. That's very interesting.
But okay, I think that's super interesting because then when you look at the presidential election, you didn't see that drastic for Kamala, right?
Right.
So,
and I think that could be a sign of just, candidate quality or what have you. Not to render judgment on her as a candidate, but that could be a reflection that these candidates who were running for governor were very well liked in their areas and had popularity. Yeah, you're smiling.
I just love to see this clash because I think what Rachel was also talking about was the Gen Z women, and Gen Z women are very liberal and Gen Z men are very conservative. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see how that starts really playing into our politics going forward.
So. I might have misspoke there. Was her stat that she posted about Gen Z women, or was it
I think it
women
was
in
Gen Z
general?
women. Give me
Okay, I
one
might
sec.
have
Yeah.
I might
Or
have
it
sent some
says,
fake news out there.
it
Sorry.
just said young women are the story tonight. So
Okay, all
I'm
right.
assuming that's Gen Z.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll throw us
yeah.
millennials in there too.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of millennial politicians, let me tell you about the politician on our playlist, Kevin Kiley. He is a 40-year-old Republican from California, and we've talked about him a little bit because he is a very outspoken critic of Gavin Newsom. He
Mhm.
was an outspoken critic of the Biden administration and certainly a lot of COVID policies and whatnot. So he represents California's third district, which is up in the Sacramento area and down kind of into Lake Tahoe. I know that you're a Sacramento, you have some Sacramento
Yeah.
roots.
Yeah.
So, big rural agriculture, mountainous district, and, some Sacramento suburbs and whatnot, which in California can definitely tend to go a little redder. And, I want to look at Prop 50 here through Kevin Kiley's lens. And, he made some comments that I thought were really good and really interesting. He was on our good buddy Alex Michelson's new show on CNN
Big
called
fan. Congrats.
Yeah, The Story Is Amazing. And so he was on there last week ahead of Prop 50. He was obviously against Prop 50, but he's sort of been one of the only Republicans, at least that we cover and that I've been really following, who has really come out against gerrymandering and has not been afraid to be a little critical of Speaker Johnson and of Trump.
Mhm.
And so Kiley had said, he was saying ultimately, I think it's going to be a wash because so many of these states are doing this now. But he was like, I'm against it in Texas. I'm against it in California. And we as Californians should reject gerrymandering because when you fight fire with fire, the whole world burns, was his quote.
Wow. So he's against it, Kevin.
Yeah. And and he was critical of Johnson's and of
Okay. Yeah.
of Texas Republicans saying this is not the way to do it. Like this is really, really bad. And, he has actually put forth a bill that has bipartisan support where he is trying to get a congressional committee to basically make congressional independent gerrymandering through this committee ahead of the next census. So I don't know that will pass, but yeah, it's great. And I think kudos to him for kind of leading on this. I want to just sort of back up too a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, I think it's like, you can't blame these states for doing it. I mean, if I was in Newsom's position, I'd do the same, right? You're not going to sit back here when like Texas sort of started this whole thing and go, yeah, we're going to let you do it because we don't think it's the right thing to do.
Right. That's what was sort of the Arnold Schwarzenegger position, that he was no on Prop 50 and was saying, no, Democrats shouldn't fight fire with fire. They should just be better and out message and out, convince. And I think that just in practice doesn't work. And that you brought up a good point, because I want to just let our viewers or remind our viewers and listeners that, this all began when Donald Trump, fearing a blue wave in the midterms, called up Governor Abbott of Texas and said, I want you to redistrict so that we can get some more Republican seats. And Governor Abbott said, okay, great. No sweat, dude. And just did it. And, that is within the law, I believe. I think it's maybe being challenged, but as of now, it seems to be a lawful move within the state of Texas. And Newsom, answered, I think, what was a growing desire among Democrats for someone to fight and someone to punch back against this stuff. And so he said, okay, well, if you're going to do it in Texas, I'm going to do it in California. But here's the difference. I'm going to put it to the voters of California so that I'm going to let the democratic process play out. And I'm going to have this be temporary. And that was really key, I think, because what ultimately Prop 50 does is it allows for California to redraw the congressional map. Currently, we have an independent redistricting commission that Schwarzenegger was a big part of in establishing. And so it basically is going to start in 2026 and will remain in effect until 2030. Then it returns to the commission. So it really is a temporary fix against the moves in Texas. And I think that was a very powerful bit of language for Newsom to put in there, because I think it helped create a popularity for it, realizing, oh, we're not just ripping this whole thing up. We're doing it temporarily to even the playing field. And it said, okay, this will end, at this date. So I thought
I
that
was
was a
unaware
good,
of that.
yeah, I think that was a really good, like, savvy political move. And the critics will say, oh, well, yeah, you just put that in there, but the voters are going to keep it extended. And, yeah, again, like, that is possible. If it becomes another proposition, like, that could pass or not. But I feel like as much as the proposition stuff in California, I find to be really just insane sometimes, it is like, it's very democratic when you slice it up at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, no, once again, I had no idea that it was actually temporary,
Yeah.
or it allows for that. And I think that is the right way to address it here. But I'm assuming in all the other states that's not how it is.
Yeah, I don't think so. Certainly not in Texas. Yeah. Other states that are doing this, North Carolina approved a new map. I don't know if that's sunsets.
Ohio is looking at it.
Yeah.
Virginia was going to look at it after this.
Yeah. Missouri did. I think Utah. So it's
Kansas.
it's
all 50 states are considering it.
Well, honestly, I mean, really, it is a bit of an arms race in that regard, because you are now having, like, all of these states based on what party controls the state legislature and who the governor is, really saying, all right, well, we're gonna do this. So it is. I understand the comment from Kylie that, like, when you fight fire with fire, the whole world burns. I mean, yeah, this is not great. I think it's important to remember who the arsonist was in all of this. And that was Donald Trump making a phone call to Abbott saying, hey, I need you to change the redistricting ahead of the census, right? So we can pay the seats.
I think I just realized what the problem with America is. When you just said Kylie, again, my first initial thought was Kylie Jenner.
Yes, Kylie Jenner. Right. Who's great. We're big fans here on the show.
I honestly bet most Americans would say the same.
Yeah.
But how about moving on to our next group?
Yeah.
How to talk about section. And today we're going to talk about SNAP. Yeah, SNAP payments. So SNAP, many of you have probably been seeing this in the news because SNAP payments ran out starting November 1st. And as we're recording, this is November 5th. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So it's the federal food assistance program administered by the Department of Agriculture through its Food and Nutrition Service. Now, this is actually one of those programs that I don't like. Everyone feels like they agree with, and people say there's really not any fraud in it and whatnot. So it's pretty sad to see this happening. But it provides monthly benefits to low and no income households to help purchase food. Eligibility is based on income, household size, expenses, and other conditions. Benefits vary state and household circumstances. It plays a huge role in fighting and reducing food insecurity for households, especially with children, older adults, and those with disabilities. 1 in 8 U.S. residents are on SNAP. to put that in perspective,
Wow.
it's approximately 42 million Americans.
Whoa.
And 39% of those recipients are children and adolescents under the age of 18. So really focused on like kids. And
Wow.
the
my
average
God.
the average like a household is basically getting is $187 a month. Okay, so like $187 doesn't even give you really
Right,
the
for a
probably
house, for a household.
like the nutritional food that you probably need. Now,
Right.
all 42 million Americans did not lose SNAP benefits on November 1st. Many are estimating between like 5-ish million did. But so like what just happened recently with the Trump administration? So Trump announced today that SNAP payments will restart, but they'll only be paying out half the amount that people normally get. Now, many Democrats.
So that 180, 180 becomes $90 for the month for food.
I haven't seen exact number, but it's just saying half of what people were normally getting, and that 180 was an average number. So
what
many
can you
young
get?
politicians.
How do you feed a family with groceries for $90?
Well, I mean, you think about like nutrition too. So like,
Right.
Is it a chicken, like fish, meat, or is beans going to be the nutritional value? Like what?
Yeah.
Like what's going to get you to that part? But a lot of Democrats have been really preaching this over the last few weeks. One of them in particular, Joe Neguse, he's a congressman from Colorado, and he's been fighting this issue because there's a $5 billion contingency fund at the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Now, those funds are normally needed. It's a contingency fund. So for disaster assistance, catastrophic events, and Trump just authorized for that $5 billion to be used. But Joe Neguse had been saying, he goes, does anyone here not believe with one phone call from Speaker Johnson to President Trump, he could get those funds released?
Right.
And frankly, I think that's a pretty hard thing to disagree with, because let's face it, I think if Speaker Johnson was like, yeah, do this, it would be done in a heartbeat. And interesting timing, Trump is doing it now after the Tuesday elections and the government shutdown. Now, I think one last thing I just want to say on SNAP that I think are important with all of these programs, like the myths and the facts. So a lot of people say, people who get SNAP benefits are lazy. People who are getting SNAP benefits are children, elderly, disabled Americans, military families, low income families. SNAP doesn't have job requirements. It does have job requirements. So able-bodied adults are on SNAP. There's been new work requirements that expanded the number of adults to, have work, train, or volunteer hours per month, which has actually driven down the amount of recipients by a couple million this year.
Wow.
But it's definitely a lie that these recipients are idle and choosing not to work.
Well, this is like
SNAP,
that old narrative of the welfare queen, right?
Yeah. Totally. And once again, all of these programs have their issues. Don't get me wrong. And welfare is a totally different issue from SNAP. But SNAP has been known to play a role in stabilizing food insecurity, improving health incomes and helping vulnerable populations. So, when you think about America, once again, can you imagine people going starving in America? I hope not. Another myth. SNAP participants are illegal citizens. SNAP is not available to undocumented immigrants and has never been eligible. It's only for U.S. citizens and legal residents. SNAP has some of the lowest fraud and waste in any government program. It has one of the most rigorous quality control systems of any public benefit program. And lastly, with the average benefit basically being at $87, sometimes even a little lower, it doesn't even fully cover nutritional costs when you think about it. I think those are just, they're like 6 important points that need to be said.
Yeah. No, I mean that's fascinating because I feel like when when I hear a lot of critics of this program, and it tends to be mostly Republicans, by and large, these cuts to SNAP payments and these lack of SNAP payments affect overwhelmingly red districts and Republican areas that voted for Trump. And and I've had this conversation with people and before, and I think it bears repeating that something I think is the hypocrisy, or rather the flaw, of this America First movement and this America First agenda is this idea that, okay, well, why are we sending billions of dollars over to the Middle East or to, you know,
Argentina.
Ukraine, or right, yeah, or like
Now
Argentina, right?
Argentina.
40 billion to Argentina. We should be taking care of our own. And the whole idea of America First is to take care of Americans. And yet the Republican Party, this party of America First, is refusing to renew SNAP payments. They're refusing to help lower healthcare premiums for poor and working class Americans. They seem to be refusing to give any sort of helping hand to our most vulnerable, all under the false pretext of these are, illegal immigrants abusing the system and it's wrought with
Yeah.
fraud. And as you pointed out, that isn't the case. That isn't what the data supports. And it seems like this could be such a winning political issue for Republicans that, it seems like a no brainer. And yet they rather cut all these things and give a $3.5 trillion tax break to the wealthy 1% and corporations who, as you said earlier, life and the economy in America is great for them right now. They're all at the Great Gatsby party down in Mar-a-Lago. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
I
it's
mean,
it's it's good for a lot of my very rich friends.
yeah,
Don't get me
yeah,
wrong, but like, to what you're saying, just where there's been negative backlash on both sides
yeah.
of these administrations giving money to various countries. It's like helping the people around you, and it always makes me think of that one like phrase, a rising tide raises all ships.
Mm-hmm.
And that should really be the epitome of like what we want is raise up the people around us in our country to be better, to serve the rest of the world. And
Right.
we're just missing that. Instead, it's just raising up the people who I'm close with. But I just I hope the government shutdown is going to end soon. I mean, I feel this is what voters are going to remember. People are going to
Mm-hmm.
have a rough Thanksgiving and a really rough Christmas. Like,
Right.
if this stuff is not figured out by then, and a lot of these people have also all been laid off.
What's your prediction as far as, do you think that Thanksgiving is going to be do you think they'll have a deal done by Thanksgiving, or do you think we're gonna see this go past Thanksgiving? Do you think this
I think
goes
a
to Christmas?
shutdown ends next week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Republicans are seeing, you can't argue with the results from last night.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, though,
You think that's gonna get them to the table?
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
do think, though, that the like, we haven't talked about the jobs market, but last
Right.
week, I mean, so
Well,
many companies laid off massive amount of employees.
um,
I mean,
was it
massive
maybe
amount.
almost like 500,000 employees
Yeah,
jobs lost last week?
it's going to be a
Right.
rough Thanksgiving and a rough Christmas for people.
Mm. Wow.
And that's I think, once again, when people are going to look back while they're voting, they're going to go, man, that Christmas 2025 was not great.
Interesting. And do you think that, it's funny, I hear a lot of Republicans come out and say, well, this is you guys. This is the Democrats who shut this down. And, Democrats clap back with that, saying, well, no, this is you guys. This is like, you guys control all branches of government. I'm curious, like, do you think it has surprised me at how lockstep Democrats seem to be in holding out on this shutdown? And we should remind listeners that what they're holding out for is to basically make Republicans come to the negotiating table about the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire in the end of November, or I think some expired November 1, and then others expire at the end of the year, which are basically going to triple the costs of premiums. And so what would happen is that people are going to have premiums that they are totally unaffordable, and they're going to just opt out of healthcare. And so then when you have particularly healthy people, right? If you have a healthy person has the choice between, okay, do I make rent this month or do I get health insurance? If I'm healthy, I'm going to say, well, let's lose the health insurance. But the challenge for that is that our health system, and again, a whole other pod episode of how flawed that is, but it needs healthy people paying in to health insurance in order for it to work. And so that's what Democrats are ultimately looking to negotiate, which Republicans have refused to even entertain. So they have been holding the line on this shutdown, and I think it's to surprise many at how lockstep they are and how they're keeping the messaging afloat. Do you think it's Republicans now who are going to break following this election? Do you think they're the ones who are going to say, okay, let's negotiate?
Yeah, I think because Democrats, whether you want to say it's their fault or not, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Like I've said this many times, when you treat someone with disrespectfully, like I think Republicans have done to Democrats, why would you want them now? Why would I need to work together when you need me?
Right.
What Democrats have done a great job is calling out what is happening in the healthcare industry. And by the way, I just confirmed my plan for 2026, and it is 3 times more than I'm paying today. 3x more.
Wow.
Like, I was like, fuck. I even sat there and was like, do I need this? I barely use it. And
yeah, my premiums have gone up.
Yeah, and then I was like, did I just lock this in when would it go down? Maybe I don't know. But once again, I don't know how people are going to afford this. And thankfully, I'm my own self. I don't have kids. You got to put yourself in other people's shoes. And this is at least one thing that Democrats have shown is how fragile this system really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen when this is actually going to come to a close. But I think, very, very surprised at just how overwhelming these elections were last night. And, I think that there's a lot of political work to be done as we head towards these midterms. And I think that what I have my eye on are people like Kevin Kiley and some of these younger Republicans and even Democrats for that matter, but more so Republicans who are in the majority, who are now maybe going to start speaking out against Trump and start speaking out against some of these policies and not being such a rubber stamp on this administration as they have been heretofore. And whether that is out of fear of getting a primary challenger or out of fear of losing their seat, I think the unpopularity of the direction of things now is very clear. And I think that, I'm watching these young House Republicans to see, all right, when do they start to break from this administration and exercise their power?
New leaders emerge, like we kind of said was the win of the week. Seeing all these women come in and I think it's very exciting to see a bunch of new fresh faces as well.